said, "Don't try to do it all alone, and if you fail, think of how well you failed, and how all you really need is a good view of the sky, or a bit of something, a flower petal or speckled stone, held close enough for the eye to drink it in. And remember," I said, "I'll always love you, no matter what." A poem by Joyce Sutphin, These Few Precepts, from her collection First Words, published by Red Dragonfly Press and used by permission here on the Writer's Almanac, supported by the Poetry Foundation, publisher of Poetry Magazine, committed to discovering great poets and printing their verse. Back issues and subscriptions available at poetryfoundation.org. Engineered by Noah Smith, produced by Joy Biles. Be well, do good work, and keep in touch.
This is the Composer's Datebook for October 30th. I'm John Zach. It was on today's date in 1944 that Martha Graham and her dance company first performed the ballet Appalachian Spring by Aaron Copland. The premiere performance took place at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., an evening of dance following 3 days of chamber music performances in honor of the 80th birthday of music patron Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge, who commissioned Copland's score for $500. Copland found an old Shaker hymn called Simple Gifts, which he used as a principal theme for his ballet. The austere but simple elegance of Shaker art reminded him, he said, of Graham's style of dancing, and tied in with her vague suggestions that the ballet would be about early American pioneers. Copland left the title up to Graham. Arriving in Washington for the rehearsals, Copland wrote, "The first thing I said to Martha when I saw her was, 'What have you called the ballet?' She replied, 'Appalachian Spring.' 'What a pretty title. Where did you get it?' I asked. And Martha said, 'Well, actually it's from a poem by Hart Crane.' I asked, 'Does the poem itself have anything to do with your ballet?' 'No,' said Martha. 'I just liked the title and used it.'" Years later, Copland delighted in telling how people would come up to him and say, "Oh, Mr. Copland, I can just see the Appalachian Mountains when I hear your music." For more on composers and their music, go to our website, composersdatebook.org. Composer's Datebook is produced by APM, American Public Media, and the American Composers Forum, reminding you that all music was once new.
Welcome back to Studio 27 on this Wednesday evening as we roll on with the late night edition, second pot edition of First Cup. And it's time for celebrity birthdays.
Damn it, Jim, what the hell's the matter with you? Other people have birthdays. Why are we treating yours like a funeral? Bones, that ought to be lectured.
And before I run down this quick list of celebrity birthdays for today, if you're celebrating your birthday today, happy birthday. And you share your birthday with these famous people. They include the Fonz, Henry Winkler. Here Comes the Boom, Happy Days is, get this, 68. Now he says, instead of, hey. Let's see here. Gavin Rossdale of Bush, married to Gwen Stefani, is 46. And Matthew Morrison of Glee fame is 35. And I told you it was a short list. Only 3 people on the list for today. I'm sure there are more, but those are the ones that my show prep service provided me. All right. Now it's time to step back in time and get ready for today in history. And I have room for one passenger in the time machine. Yeah, I know it's a DeLorean, but just humor me, okay? Besides, if you're going to go back in time, let's do it some style. Okay? So, are you ready? Okay, so get in the car. Get in the car. I'll turn on the time circuits, start the engine, and away we go. And let's go back to October 30th, 1894. On this date, October 30th, 1894, Daniel M. Cooper of Rochester, New York, patented the time clock. So, we finally have the name of the bastard who invented the time clock. And according to his invention, he was 3 hours late. Daniel M. Cooper of Rochester, New York. On this date, 1894. So, when you're late for work, you can blame Daniel M. Cooper of Rochester, New York, who I'm sure is long since dead now, of telling the boss, narking to the boss about how long you were late for work. Now, for more today in history, let's go to the Associated Press.
Something wriggling out of the shadow like a gray snake. Now it's another one, and another one, and another one.
October 30th, 1938. A fictional invasion by Martians on the radio spooks Americans on Halloween Eve.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. It's so awful. The eyes are black and they gleam like a serpent. The mouth is kind of V-shaped with saliva dripping from its rimless lips. It seemed to quiver and pulsate.
As the live drama The War of the Worlds, starring Orson Welles, airs on CBS. The play's fake news reports panic some listeners who think the Martian invasion is real. 1998. In Nicaragua, a mudslide caused by Hurricane Mitch kills at least 2,000 people. 1974. It's the rumble in the jungle in Zaire, now known as the Democratic Republic of Congo. Muhammad Ali knocks out George Foreman in the 8th round of a 15-round bout, regaining his world heavyweight title. And 2000.
I want to give you the bad news first. This program is going to go on forever. Boy, you think you're tired now.
Steve Allen, comedian, TV host, author, and composer, dies in Encino, California. Allen, the first host of NBC's Tonight Show, was 78 years old. Today in history, October 30th. Ed Donahue, The Associated Press.
This is Across Our Wide Missouri with Bob Priddy.
For many years, Missouri was a state sustained by its river trade. He who could gain a large share of that trade would gain a sizable quantity of the wealth that would come from a nation moving west. Along came a stubborn Irishman named Joseph Kinney. Some say he invented the stern wheeler. Regardless, he became a captain of the Missouri River and parlayed trade and travel on it into a fortune. We'll tell his story in a minute.
I was just finishing my 199th picture. Never felt better in my life, and I said to myself, when this is finished, I'm going out on my boat. And then I got nagged into going for a medical checkup. They found a spot on the x-rays. It was lung cancer. If I'd waited a few more weeks, I wouldn't be here now. That's me 7 years after surgery, in true grit, because I did myself a favor and got a checkup. So why don't all of you do yourselves a favor? Get a checkup. Talk someone you like into getting a checkup. Nag someone you love into getting a checkup. And while you're at it, send a check to the American Cancer Society, too. It's great to be alive.
When Joseph Kinney showed up in Boonville in 1844, he had $10 in his pocket. He'd already gone broke a couple of times trying to set up business operations on the rivers. Pennsylvania-born, he'd been a pork packer first in Madison, Indiana, saved enough money to buy a riverboat, which he used to carry the mail for 2 years between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. But he went bankrupt, and he returned to Indiana to pack more pork. He saved up money again, bought another boat, but the boat sank. Kinney decided to come west. He became a shoe merchant in Boonville and later in St. Louis. Never forgetting his love of the river, he again accumulated enough money, and this time he built his own steamboat in 1856. He called it the William H. Russell for his friend, who was then getting into the overland shipping business and who later would be part of the Pony Express. In time, he owned a fleet of 21 steamers. His boats plied the Missouri from St. Louis to Fort Benton, Montana, and from St. Louis to New Orleans on the Mississippi. Lou Larkin tells of the time that Kinney got into a steamboat race and won by stuffing barrels of salt pork into the boilers to build up steam. The smell was awful, but the victory money was sweet. Kinney was part of an era of explosive growth in steamboating. River historian Jane Curry says steamboat tonnage on the Mississippi had surpassed that of all the Atlantic ports combined in the 1840s. Total tonnage on western waters in 1860, she says, was 10 million tons. The total doubled in 20 years and increased until 1895 when it began to decline. Some people disagree on Kinney's invention of the stern wheeler, but if he didn't invent it, he was at least one of the first to see the practicality of putting the paddle wheel behind the ship instead of putting paddle wheels on the sides. Kinney figured ships could navigate tight bends in the river better if the wheel was behind. His boats were about 200 feet long, 40 feet wide, with luxurious appointments. Riverboating became a social occasion when Kinney ran the river. His daughter sometimes took a group of friends with her on one of Daddy's boats, and they'd dance all the way to St. Louis. The great years of the 1850s and 60s were the years Kinney collected much of his fortune. Freight rates were high. Passengers relied on the steamboats in great numbers to take them west, or at least as far as Independence, where they could join a wagon train. During the Civil War, when the Confederates burned important bridges between St. Louis and Jefferson City, Kinney is said to have made $40,000 in 3 months by ferrying troops and supplies upstream. Kinney was smart enough to move his boats to the Mississippi during the winter when the Missouri River navigation season was stopped by ice. He paid his employees well. Some of his captains got as much as $1,000 a month. He left the river in 1869, although he retained some large buildings for the river trade. He built an 11-room mansion that cost $50,000 across the river from Boonville, despite advice from long-time river rats who forecasted eventually would be washed away by the river. But Kinney had a deep substructure built just in case, and in the worst floods since, water reached the house, but never swept it away. It is still there. It is a magnificent structure, with mahogany and walnut doors and woodwork and banisters. The grand staircase has a hand-carved banister. No nails were used. Marble for the fireplaces was imported from Italy. A hand-carved mahogany banquet table was made to seat 30. Once brocaded wallpaper adorned the walls. He called his magnificent place River Scene, and it was there that he spent his retirement. He was entirely out of the river trade in 1882, and he died 10 years later. Captain Joseph Kinney, who turned the muddy Missouri River into a river of gold, was born on this date, October 30th, in 1810.
Hi friends, Joe Hafner here. Are you interested in buying, selling, trading, or renting a house? Or maybe you're in the market for buying or selling a car? Or perhaps selling or giving away clothes, furniture, or electronics? Well, I can help you out. Just email me, joe@Gunther'sHouseOfFriends@gmail.com. That's Gunther'sHouseOfFriends@gmail.com. Email me today with your item and or items, and together we'll come up with a creative way to buy, sell, trade, or rent any reasonable item or service that you want. Keep in mind, though, I don't deal with the exchange of firearms, alcohol items, drugs, or anything illegal or immoral. So send me an email today at Gunther'sHouseOfFriends@gmail.com.
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're going to rock around the clock tonight. Hey, the glad rags on. Join me, honey. We'll have some fun when the clock strikes 1. We're going to rock around the clock tonight. We're going to rock, rock, rock till broad daylight. We're going to rock around the clock tonight. When the clock strikes 2, 3, and 4, if the band slows down, we'll yell for more. We're going to rock around the clock tonight. We're going to rock, rock, rock till broad daylight. We're going to rock around the clock tonight.
Welcome back to Studio 27 as we head back to the class of 1955 for the original Happy Days theme. Wow, hard to believe this was revolutionary music, but it's still a great tune to listen to. Interesting to know about the Happy Days theme, this was used in the first season. The song familiar by Bill Haley in the comments, Rock Around the Clock. And the rhythm of that song was kept for the subsequent themes